Welcome to an exploration into the gritty world of trench warfare survival. Today, we're diving into the raw and unfiltered experiences of soldiers who endured the harshest conditions imaginable. So, let's journey back and uncover the secrets that kept them alive. You know, the deadliest enemy in the trenches wasn't always bullets or shells. It was the ground beneath your body. It might sound surprising at first, but the very earth these soldiers stood on often posed the greatest threat to their survival. That single fact shaped one of the most ingenious survival techniques ever used by soldiers. A trench bedding trick so practical and effective that entire armies relied on it to stay alive. And yet, today, it's barely mentioned, rarely taught, and almost completely forgotten outside old manuals and battlefield accounts. Not because it stopped working, but because modern warfare moved on. It's fascinating how such a crucial piece of history can fade into obscurity, isn't it? And that's exactly why this story matters. This is not about nostalgia. This is about raw, field-tested survival knowledge that kept men alive in mud, cold, rot and darkness for months at a time. It's a testament to human resilience and ingenuity under the harshest conditions. A technique born from necessity, refined by suffering, and quietly abandoned once technology took over. Here's the real story behind the trench bedding trick modern armies stopped teaching, and why it still matters today. So, let's talk about the real problem and, the solution that soldiers tried to come up with. The conditions in those trenches were honestly just awful. Mud, water and filth everywhere made life miserable and, dangerous. But soldiers had to find a way to survive, to keep themselves dry and as healthy as possible. The solution they came up with wasn't perfect, but it was a matter of life or death. The real problem was the ground. Early 20th century trench warfare exposed a brutal truth. The earth itself could kill you. Soldiers weren't sleeping on clean soil. They were lying on waterlogged clay, decomposing organic matter, human waste, and constant seepage from rain and groundwater. In places like Flanders, the water table sat just inches below the surface. Dig a trench, and it filled like a bathtub. Men slept soaked. Boots never dried. Clothing, it just rotted on their bodies. Skin broke down and, infections followed. Trench foot alone hospitalized hundreds of thousands during World War I, and many never fully recovered. Cold, damp and immobility destroyed circulation and tissue. This wasn't a comfort issue. It was a survival crisis. Commanders quickly realized that if soldiers couldn't rest, they couldn't fight. But traditional bedding was useless. Blankets absorbed moisture. Straw mattresses turned into mold farms. Lying directly on the trench floor was a slow sentence to illness. The solution had to separate the body from the ground, completely. So, let's talk about the trench bedding trick for a moment. It might sound simple, but honestly, this was a real game-changer for soldiers stuck in those muddy, waterlogged trenches. The basic idea was to keep men off the cold, wet ground, which, made a world of difference in their comfort and health. Day after day, night after night, finding even a little relief from the mud and damp could mean everything. Sometimes it's the small innovations that really stand out in history, and this one, it's right up there. the trench bedding trick that changed everything. The breakthrough was deceptively simple. Elevate the sleeper above the trench floor using a layered system of drainage, airflow and insulation. This wasn't luxury. It was engineering under fire. The core of the trick was raised bedding built from duckboards, branches, wooden slats, or even woven wire. These platforms lifted the body several inches above standing water and mud. That air gap was everything. It allowed moisture to drain away instead of soaking upward into clothing and skin. On top of the platform came insulating layers. Straw when available, but also sacks stuffed with dry grass, reeds, pine needles or shredded fabric. Some units use folded greatcoats or spare uniforms. The key wasn't softness. It was dryness and airflow. Critically, bedding was never placed flat against trench walls. That invited seepage. Instead, it was angled or suspended slightly, allowing water to run past rather than collect. In better-built trenches, soldiers even slept in recessed wall niches dug above the floor line, keeping them out of pooled water entirely. This system reduced trench footcases dramatically when enforced. Soldiers who stayed dry stayed functional. Those who didn't often ended up evacuated. And here's the part most people miss. This wasn't improvised chaos. It was taught. As we delve into the official recognition and subsequent decline, it becomes clear how the tides of war shifted over time. Why did armies take bedding so seriously, you might wonder? Well, by the year 1916, trench bedding instructions were included in official field manuals. The British, French and German armies all stressed the importance of elevation, drainage and insulation. Officers regularly inspected sleeping setups, and men were ordered to rebuild platforms after heavy rain. Entire fatigue details, indeed, were assigned to maintaining duckboards. And why was this so crucial? Because rest, quite simply, was a combat multiplier. A soldier who slept dry could think clearly, aim steadily, and march farther. On the other hand, one who slept soaked became slow, sick, and unreliable. In the static warfare of the time, survival often came down to these small margins. Bedding wasn't just about comfort, it was about readiness. This knowledge didn't come from theory. It came from bodies pulled out of trenches with blackened feet and infected wounds, hard lessons burned into institutional memory. So, what happened? How modern warfare let the skill fade? In the end, modern warfare brought new challenges and, well, some uncomfortable truths. The lessons of the past, hard-earned and costly, began to slip away as tactics and technology changed. Yet the consequences of forgetting them, they still linger on the battlefield. As warfare mechanized, trenches became temporary instead of permanent. Armoured vehicles, rapid movement, air support and modern logistics changed everything. Soldiers rotated more often. Bases had raised floors, tents, heaters and synthetic sleeping systems. Modern armies replaced fieldcraft with equipment, sleeping pads, Gore-Tex, lightweight cots, climate-controlled shelters. The old trench bedding systems were labelled obsolete. But the knowledge didn't stop being useful. It just stopped being taught. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern gear fails. Pads puncture, tents flood, supply lines break. And when that happens, soldiers and civilians are back to basics. And that's when this forgotten trick suddenly becomes, just priceless. The logic behind this method, well, it really endures through the years. Even today, the hidden health impact of staying dry and warm in harsh conditions can't be overstated. It's one of those simple ideas that, honestly, can mean the difference between sickness and survival. The survival logic still works today. If you strip away the history, the trench bedding trick is, at its core, pure survival science. Keep the body off wet ground, create airflow, insulate from below, drain moisture away. That's it, nothing fancy, just solid, time-tested wisdom. These principles apply anywhere. Jungle, swamp, snowfield, flood zone, even an urban collapse scenario. Raised sleeping platforms are still used by indigenous groups, early explorers and long-range survivalists. The methods change, but the logic doesn't. Branches lash between supports, stones stacked to lift planks, ropes suspending hammocks just inches above ground when trees are scarce. The mistake modern people make is focusing on what's above them instead of what's beneath them. Cold and moisture rise. Ground steals heat faster than air ever will. Trench soldiers learned that lesson the hard way. The hidden health impact most people ignore. What made trench bedding so effective wasn't just dryness, it was circulation. When the body sleeps cold and compressed against wet ground, blood flow slows, tissue starves of oxygen, nerves suffer, infection thrives. Elevation allowed micro-movement and warmth retention. Even just a few inches made a measurable difference. Soldiers reported fewer cramps, better sleep, and faster recovery after long watches. This wasn't just comfort theory. It was battlefield medicine before antibiotics. And once you understand that, you realize how much survival knowledge has been quietly lost to convenience. Now, as we reflect on the legacy of survival, it's clear that these old methods carry lessons far beyond their time. They remind us, really, of the resilience and ingenuity needed to endure the harshest conditions. It's not just about surviving. It's about adapting, learning, and, passing on knowledge that can truly make a difference. Why does this skill belong in the legacy of survival? The trench bedding trick, really represents everything that modern survival culture often overlooks. It's low-tech, resource-driven, and honestly uncomfortable but effective. It was designed for long-term hardship, not just short-term camping. It doesn't rely on buying the right gear. Instead, it relies on understanding physics, the environment, and, of course, the human body. That's why it matters. Because history already tested it under the worst conditions imaginable. And it worked. The final lesson worth remembering. The soldiers who survived the trenches didn't do so because they were tougher. They survived because they adapted faster. They paid attention to small details that honestly compounded into survival. Bedding was one of those details. The ground doesn't care how strong you are. It will take your heat, your health, and eventually your strength if you let it. Elevation is resistance. Insulation is defense. Drainage is survival. That lesson is as relevant now as it was a century ago. If this kind of forgotten knowledge fascinates you, real skills forged under pressure, tested by history and still useful today, then you're exactly where you should be. Stay connected with legacy of survival. Like the video if you learn something new. Share it with someone who values real-world skills over modern shortcuts. And subscribe, because history has a lot more to teach us, if we're willing to listen. The old tricks aren't dead. They're just waiting to be remembered.